We made this.
Hello and welcome to the first episode of ChuckyVision, the podcast about the Child's Play franchise right here on the We Made This podcast network. My name's Mark Adams and I am your host. The next 7 weeks, 8 weeks, because we're doing a primer followed by all of the films. We'll be looking at the films and then we will be looking at the brand new TV series, Chucky. With me for this journey is my co-host, Dev Elson. Hello, Dev.
Hi, everyone. Very excited to be here. Very excited to talk Chucky on air or off air. I just love discussing Chucky.
It's one of those franchises, a bit like Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th. If you're a horror fan, you just love it. Maybe Nightmare on Elm Street just pips it, but I think it could be my favourite horror franchise, you know.
A lot of other franchises. I mean, Nightmare on Elm Street did want to be really fun, and it almost gets too fun in the later ones, whereas Friday the 13th for a while was trying to be just a straight out-and-out slasher. And it took until, like, part 6 for a director to actually start having fun with the formula. I think Chucky had a strong vision right from the start. It's, you know, your classic sort of Cabbage Patch 80s doll, but with a serial killer inside it. You know, they knew right from the start that it was scary, but also silly. And that tone has dipped up and down, but been very consistent in the franchise.
Yeah, I think as a concept, it's very much, look what we're doing. It is comedy horror. But I would also argue that stuff like Nightmare on Elm Street is comedy horror. Freddy is very, very witty. You know, he does crack some fucking terrible jokes that I laugh at in the Freddy films. But I think you're right. I think it was very much a look at what we've got. This is what we're doing. It is a damn scary franchise in a number of places. But it is funny too.
It is. And we'll definitely get into the idea, like the tonal discrepancies and stuff, because we're going to be doing Child's Play 1 right after this. And that's a really interesting one to look at. It's not so much the direct vision of Chucky creator Don Mancini. There's, you know, directors and producers also in there. So it's interesting from the start that Child's Play 1 is this sort of amalgamation of different ideas. That's the biggest difference, I think, between all the other franchises, is that they all start, you know, the first Nightmare on Elm Street is Wes Craven's idea. The first Halloween is John Carpenter's vision. Yeah. Whereas Child's Play starts off this studio film almost. And then as it goes on, they give more and more free rein to the creator and it becomes its own thing.
Yeah, and I think that's more likely what we'll see with the Chucky TV series, which is basically the reason why we started doing this podcast. I'm going to quickly go through what the plan is for ChuckyVision, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, let's get an idea.
Okay, so we're doing a primer where you and me introduce ourselves and have a chat. That is what you are listening to now. And then we're going to go through all of the first 7 films, which includes the first 5 cinematic films and the 2 straight to DVD. We're not looking at the remake yet because we haven't got time before Chucky starts. When Chucky starts, we're going to go straight into that series and we're going to watch it on a weekly basis and do a weekly review for the whole 10-episode run. Then we're going to have a bit of a sit down, a cup of tea, and then look at what else we can look at within the Chucky franchise. We will look at the remake. We will look at some of the DVD extras like Chucky slides and things like that. And we might have a look at some of the obscurities like, I don't know, films inspired by Chucky and that sort of thing. There's I discovered the other day that there's I think it's like a Urdu language equivalent, which is basically Chucky, but in Urdu,
Oh,
made in Bollywood.
We need to get to that pronto.
But the hope is that series 2 of Chucky will become a thing, and if it gets a second series, obviously we will look at that as well.
Definitely, I'm going to have a look at it either way, yeah.
Well, yeah, what I mean is look at it on the podcast and hopefully continue the podcast for longer than people might have expected. I think we're going to get like 25, 30 episodes out of this.
That is a dream come true.
All right, so Dev, for people who haven't listened to your stuff in the past, people who haven't met you, people who don't know you, brief introduction about yourself and your love of horror.
Yeah, I've always loved horror in one capacity or another. I would say in terms of people knowing me, I'm definitely not big or anything. I've done podcasts in the past. I did a Friday the 13th podcast. Seems similar to this, but not really, because we wanted to do one of those minute by minute podcasts, but we realized there was like 400, 500 minutes if we were going to do it every Friday the 13th. So we stuck by the title and we did 13-minute chunks each episode. And that was really a fascinating way to watch the first couple of those films. It went on hiatus. We need to finish it. But that was a really fascinating way to watch those films, because a lot of critics would say that a simple slash like Friday the 13th has nothing going on. Partly true. It's not like each minute is filled with hidden depth, but exploring horror in such minute detail, there's things to be found.
I agree. There's some real tat that has minute by minute fucking podcasts.
General sense is why I love horror, because horror comes from the unconscious, you know. Horror comes from like beneath the heart. Looking at even the dumbest films in detail reveals that the horror is coming from someplace, and you can always sort of relate it to the wider world, even if it is a killer doll.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think for me, horror is something I've loved since I was very, very young, and I was reading inappropriate books too early. I remember reading Sean Hudson. I think I was about like 8 or 9 or 10. My parents didn't know what the fuck I was reading. I did, and it scared the shit out of me, and I loved it. And I think ever since then, horror's been something that's fascinated me, absolutely fascinated me.
Yeah, same. I remember two weird things. I remember at the library they had one of those. It was not a novelization of Friday the 13th. It was like original books based.
Oh yeah.
They were written around the time of like Jason X and stuff, so it was like Jason X goes to the moon or whatever and stuff, and that was an entire book.
Oh shit, I need to read these books.
Yeah, in terms of books, I think there was like 4 sequels to Jason X somehow. But I remember reading
Fantastic.
I remember reading one of those as a kid, even though I don't think I'd only seen bits and pieces of the movies, but I was reading an entire book about Jason. And I remember at the same time talking about reading books too early. You know, I read Clive Barker's The Hellbound Heart, what Hellraiser was based on. And that was a weird psychosexual world.
Just a bit. Oh, that's another franchise I fucking love. No more podcasts for Mark, but if there was a Hellraiser podcast, no more podcasts for Mark.
That's definitely a franchise where the sequels are just utter nonsense.
So the first Hellraiser film is an absolute masterpiece. Fight me if you think I'm wrong on that, because it is just a superb horror film. The second one is just about okay. The third one, it's like they've made a completely new franchise with a guy who looks like Pinhead, but I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. So I think it's in the same way of some of the later Chucky films. Hellraiser 1 is a great film because of its constraints. It's very low budget and it's very small scale. There's so much going on in it, and it alludes to a bigger world. And I feel like as much as I love Hellraiser 2, yeah, definitely giving it more budget to explore that world, it gets a bit messy. The conclusion to that is Hellraiser 3, where I don't think they know exactly what they are exploring there.
But I think horror does that a lot. I think you're right that to some extent the Chucky franchise does it, but you compare Hellraiser with its tiny budget but its incredible story and real horrible kind of body horror to something like Saw, and then you see what happened to both of those franchises afterwards. They did become really convoluted, and I think that is a problem in horror that maybe the Chucky franchise actually circumnavigated by recognizing what they were doing and bringing out Bride of Chucky.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, there is some contention. We're saying how consistent the Chucky franchise is. There is definitely some contention between Bride and Seed, whether or not they went off the rails. But I think they were different. They were very consciously exploring where the franchise could go, because probably the low light of the franchise is Child's Play 3, because it's just the same. It's the same formula. It's the same movie, just done again, but not as good. And they knew they had to explore other avenues and go in different directions. That gave them, even if you don't like Seed of Chucky, it gave them so many story ideas and so many different directions to go in, that even though Curse and Cult of Chucky are more restrained and more in line with Child's Play, there's so much story going on throughout them.
Yeah.
That really helps for a franchise. You look at Nightmare on Elm Street, those later ones, it's like, what can we do with Freddy? How can we explore different avenues of Freddy? And that's where you get his son of 1,000 maniacs and his weird nun mother, and then he tries to have that nightmare child, the kid from Jurassic Park, and that was really weird.
Oh, it's going to be a lot of fun covering Seed of Chucky, I think, because it's batshit crazy.
I mean, that film is batshit crazy, but unlike some other horror sequels, it absolutely knows it's batshit crazy. I mean, it's an entire homage to Ed Wood. Who the fuck is doing that when they're like 6 films deep into a slasher franchise?
Like I say, there's something really charming about the Chucky franchise, and it is quite a ballsy franchise. We love it because it's ballsy, I think.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, we'll get into the guy himself, Don Mancini, but he's an openly gay screenwriter and filmmaker, and a lot of other franchises, mainly due because they're coming out during the 80s and 90s, they're very camp, unintentionally gay. I mean, there's a whole documentary on Nightmare on Elm Street 2 on whether or not that film is gay, because it's
gayest film ever.
It's so
I love it.
Queer coded. The screenwriter says it was, and the director says it wasn't, and there's all this contention. Whereas the Chucky franchise seems to get, gayer and gayer as it goes on. I mean, it's wonderful in how transparent it gets as it goes on. I mean, the Chucky franchise, he said right at the start, this new kid, the new Andy, Jake, his name is, he is gay. That's really interesting that we're going to get a whole show to, explore what it is to be like, a gay kid in that age. That's cool, really cool.
Couldn't agree more. It wasn't a franchise that spoke to me as a gay man, as a kid in that way, but as it's become more and more queer, I'm all about that. And I'm 42. I'm not so bothered about representation anymore. But I know that if I was that age and this teleseries was coming out, the main protagonist in a slasher is a gay teenager. That's fucking great.
Yeah, that is really cool. I mean, that's a key word you put up, representation. That's what is so wonderful about the Chucky franchise, is that there are gay characters in, I think, Curse of Chucky, and, it gets more evident as it goes on near the tail end. It's not so much representation. It's a gay creator really enjoying his own personal, camp style.
I couldn't agree more. We've, already started talking about Chucky and the franchise, but I did prepare some kind of questions that would give us an idea of our love of Chucky. So I'm going to use them because, I did some fucking work.
I did answer them, yeah.
So I'm going to ask you first, and then I'm going to answer my own questions after you. The first question I came up with was, how did you first encounter Chucky?
I really tried to remember what the first Chucky I saw was. I'm 27, so I was trying to think, was Bride of Chucky the kind of film that was in the zeitgeist when I was growing up? And then that film came out
Probably.
The film came out in 1998, so I would have been 4 then. I remember Seed of Chucky coming out. I remember the early 2000s, those kind of movies coming out, because I vividly remember seeing Terminator 3 in the cinema.
Wow.
In the cinema, they had these big marquees, the big, the 3D sort of cardboard cutouts, and they had Freddy versus Jason. I knew those characters, but I wasn't familiar with the franchises. So I Freddy and Jason and Chucky, they became pop culture icons really fast. And so I knew who these guys were, and I was excited for a movie that I really didn't have any investment in. And I think that was the same thing with Chucky, like we talked about reading books as a kid. I would go into the library, I'd go into Blockbuster, and I'd see all these like VHS covers of movies. And I remember seeing Bride of Chucky a lot, and I remember going into like shops like Forbidden Planet. I remember seeing the Chucky doll in its good guy packaging, the Bride of Chucky version, the scarred face and all that. And I vividly remember seeing that and being like, who is that guy? It's definitely interesting how I first encountered Chucky. It wasn't like, oh, this new film Child's Play is coming out. He was already in the world, and I was discovering him that way. And it took a while for me to actually see the movies where he came from.
For me, I was, obviously I'm a little bit older than you. So in 1988, when Child's Play was released, I was 10. I did not watch it then.
I was going to say, wow, 10 years old, that was a prime age. Yeah, you were like Andy then.
Yeah, I guess so, actually, thinking about it. But my mum and dad were quite protective when it came to what we were allowed to watch. Regards, they actually took notice of certification, and we just simply weren't allowed to watch anything that we weren't old enough for. And so I knew of it. I'd seen the posters in the video shop, which was basically the little supermarket down the road when I was growing up. But I'd seen these posters with this doll on that was evil, and that always fascinated me. And as soon as I kind of hit 15, 16, my friends, we all kind of like used to have like parties around each other's house when mum and dad were away and stuff like that. And we would go to the video shop and we could get all the horrors that we could get that were 15. We couldn't get the 18 because the video shop guy knew damn well we weren't 18. But we would get all the 15s. I think one of the Children of the Corns, one of the Phantasm films as well.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think it was the first Child's Play. It might have been the second or even the third. Can't have been the third. The third's an 18. So it must have been the first or second. And we were just 15 and we rented it out. We just loved it. We used to just sit there in the dark, trying to like scare each other by shaking each other when the bad shit happened. And it's just like memories of childhood for me with regards to the Chucky franchise. But then I remember when Bride of Chucky came out, obviously I was a grown up and I went to see that at a cinema. And yeah, Bride of Chucky is such a fun film. I don't think it was quite what I was expecting.
I don't think anyone was expecting Bride of Chucky.
No, I saw Bride of Chucky at the cinema, and I'm pleased about that because, I was at uni and I went to see a lot of films, when I was supposed to be working, supposed to be doing some uni work, which I didn't do very much of. And I got a Desmond. For our international listeners, I have been very British. The term Desmond is a derogatory term for a 2-2 degree. What it means is you're bright enough to have done well, but you drank a lot. And obviously Desmond Tutu is the reference. There's the fella, Desmond Tutu. Anyway, I've got sidetracked. I do that. Second question was, what's your favourite Chucky film?
That has definitely changed over time. I think for a while I went with the standard, elitist isn't the word, the standard, where, everyone says, oh, the original is always the best. For any franchise, they always go, the original is the best. Mm. And I definitely love the original. It's a very good suspense film, and it's got an amazing finale. We don't call it the Child's Play franchise, we call it the Chucky franchise. We're here for Chucky, and there really isn't a lot of Chucky in the first film. You really only get Brad Dourif doing his thing like halfway into the movie. There just isn't quite enough of it. Whereas Child's Play 2, I remember watching that and thinking, oh, it's an okay sequel. I've seen it again and again, and it's Child's Play again, but everyone knows who Chucky is, so they just show who Chucky is right at the start, and so you get a whole film of Chucky. And it's also really quite a good film. It's directed very differently, and the finale, I would argue, is maybe even better than the first film, and it's a really good sequel to a horror film. Yeah, maybe that might be my favorite because I do really love the later Chucky entries, but I think that's a really good theatrical film, I think.
Right. For me, I think I'm inclined to agree that there is real value to the first one. It is almost a perfect horror film in a lot of ways. There is also the cliche of the first is the best. I agree. For me, it's definitely a toss-up between the first one and Bride of Chucky. I guess it depends on what you want from the Chucky franchise.
Hmm.
The thing about Bride was it was such a subversive move, changing it from cinematic music to a soundtrack full of rock bangers. That was a big deal. And the soundtrack to Bride of Chucky is fucking awesome. You know, I'd never heard of Monster Magnet before Bride of Chucky. I think it's just Bride that pips it for me because it's still got all the stuff you want to love about horror. It knows what it is, and it takes the piss, and it's funny, and it's got a banging soundtrack. So it's just Bride of Chucky for me, I think.
Exactly. I do wonder just how much during this entire podcast we're going to reference Bride of Chucky, because it's just such a strong entry in the franchise. I don't want to get into it too much because question 4, this is going to be my answer. But yeah, I really do like middle entries in horror franchises. Some are really bad and some are really good, but there's always around the middle, some film creator comes in, course corrects, like if you want this franchise to keep going, we need to do something different, and that's exactly what happened with Chucky.
Definitely. So, question 3 is, what's your favourite Chucky moment?
You know, it's funny you mentioned the music, because I think I thought of a lot of things. I was like, you know, the finale where Chucky dies, or like, you know, maybe like a really good kill and stuff. But such an oddly specific one for me is the makeover of Tiffany in Bride of Chucky.
Brilliant.
To the montage to the Blondie track, Call Me. I think it's just such a weird and fun tonal change to everything. It really sets things up that before, like, I mean, compared to Child's Play 1, you know, you really don't see much of Chucky in the first half. You know, there's ideas explored with the Chucky doll that don't follow up in the sequels and stuff like that. But then this was a film where they just got rid of the main character, Andy. They just got rid of him. And this was about the dolls. Not just about Chucky, but like they introduce a whole new character of Tiffany. This is just such a really strong... It's not the intro. I mean, we got to know her as a person played by Jennifer Tilly. This was such a strong introduction to her as the doll that she will be in all the sequels. You know, the blonde hair and the leather jacket, you know, just the whole like weird goth look. It's fun. It's just so fun.
I struggled with what my answer to this would be. And that is a fantastic scene. You're absolutely right. And my favourite scene was basically, I went through my head again and again, what am I going to pick? But when I wrote that question, the first thing that came to mind, and I think it's a surprisingly important scene when you think about it, was the scene in the back of the car where, again in Bride of Chucky, where the guy gets a face full of nails and looks like Pinhead from Hellraiser. And for me, I feel like that statement of we are taking the piss out of horror now was an important statement that they needed to make. It was satire. It was poking fun at a rival franchise. It was completely unexpected, and it was funny as fuck. I don't know. I've always been a fan of the elaborate deaths. If you come up with a death that I haven't seen or a death that I really like, that will get you many, many brownie points for me. Very recently in the Fear Street film, completely out of the blue, that girl got her head put through a bread slicer.
Oh my
I was
God.
like, fuck yeah!
That film, every other death in that film, it's just people getting stabbed. And then that happens. It's so out of nowhere.
I know, right? And that's what I like in horror. I like stuff that I'm not ready for. I like stuff that I'm not expecting. And I like stuff that I just sit back and go, fucking hell, that's cool. And so for me, it's probably a terrible choice, but I've at least vaguely justified it. The Hellraiser thing in Bride of Chucky, it is my favourite moment. And I'm looking forward to watching it again, and I'll probably rewind it when I watch it.
Yeah, no, that's a strong moment, because again, it's Don Mancini and it's the franchise acknowledging how different they're going to go and how different this is going to be, because it's not just elaborate, as you say, but it's deliberately elaborate, because I remember when John Ritter is investigating the van, Chucky pulls out a knife and he's just going to stab him, and Tiffany is like, that's so lame and old school, and I think she references Martha Stewart. You have to adapt and improvise. So that is a really strong moment, actually.
And the fourth question, I think we've kind of started talking about this already. Why Chucky? What is it about Chucky that makes you want to create, clearly, hours of podcasts? Because we've already started as we mean to go on by the looks of things.
For me, is I've looked at the middle points in franchises in separate points. I remember writing about Halloween 5 ages ago, and that's a really middling Halloween film. But then they throw in, have you seen Halloween 5?
I've seen all of the Halloweens, but it's been a while.
Well, it's not memorable, but yeah, it's a really middling Michael Myers film. And then every now and again, they cut to this guy in a black trench coat with a hat, and he's got these like cowboy boots on with like silver spurs. And they just keep cutting to him walking around Haddonfield. And then Halloween 5 ends with him going to jail, Michael Myers. Yeah, they put him in jail with his mask on. And then
that's not wise.
And then this guy in this black trench coat with a machine gun breaks him out of jail, and that's the end of the movie. That was a turning point in the franchise where the producers were like, we can't just keep doing Michael Myers films, we need to add something different. But they never actually had an idea of who this guy was. They put him in the film so that the people of Halloween 6 would have to like retroactively make sense of who this guy was. And Halloween 6 was complete nonsense because that guy turned out to be a doctor we saw in one scene in Halloween 1. And then it turned out that Michael Myers was raised as a kid for some weird astrological cult to like murder his whole family. That was a turning point in a franchise where it made no sense.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen Halloween 5. I think I lied. I don't remember that at all.
Well, Halloween 5 is really boring because everything is set up but nothing pays off. And then Halloween 6 is the payoff, but it's a payoff that no one wanted.
Which one was the one that had the banger by Alice Cooper, the man behind the mask?
Well, I was going to get to that is Friday the 13th, Part 6.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I'm getting confused.
I was going to talk about that. I just reviewed that recently because I think it turned 35. That is an incredible turning point, sort of like Bride of Chucky, because some of those films, I mean, some of the films before, like Part 3, and some of the films after, like Part 7 and 8, they're okay, but they're not very good. Creatively, they don't know what they're doing. They're putting out another Friday the 13th. Jason was dead in Part 4. That's how they made that film good. They just killed him at the end. Part 5 was a paramedic called Roy who just put on the mask and he was the bad guy.
Roy.
Yeah, Roy the killer.
Right, okay, good. It sounds like the bald fella down the road with a bit of a beer belly, doesn't it, Roy?
To course correct, they brought in this guy who had only worked in comedy before. They were like, you can do whatever you want. The only thing is you need to bring back Jason. He was like, well, I'm not going to think of some convoluted nonsense of why he's back. It's going to open with a character from the last film digging up Jason's grave. Then out of nowhere, a bolt of lightning hits Jason's corpse, and he's back from the dead. Because if it worked in Frankenstein, why wouldn't it work in this?
It also works in Child's Play, so
Exactly, lightning is just magic. Friday Part 6 is wonderful because it just plays with all the tropes, and it just, it turns what was once just a normal hillbilly living out in the woods. He's just suddenly now an indestructible Terminator who just kills everyone, and it completely aligned Friday the 13th into everything what people think about Friday the 13th. To get back to the question, that's why I love looking at Chucky, because some of those films are a little bit samey, but there's always something going on in the story, and Don Mancini's always steering it somewhere, and that's why the TV show is going to be so interesting, because he ended the last film with so many cliffhangers because he knew that eventually someone's going to ask for more Chucky.
I think you're right. I think for me, I've really enjoyed, despite my initial cynicism, the TV show versions of the classic film franchises I liked. So Ash vs. the Evil Dead was fucking sublime. And the Scream series was better than it had any right to be. And I think when I saw the announcement for Chucky, I was like, right, this is it. I'm going to pounce on this one. This is the opportunity to do one of those podcasts where you watch a show and you immediately review it and you try and get it out as quickly as you can after the show airs. And I've been kind of looking at doing a podcast like that for a while now. as soon as I saw the Chucky thing, I was like, that's the one, because I fucking love Chucky.
Yeah, that's it. That's, it's a great impetus. Again, it's not even just talking Chucky. It's like everything connects. It's like Chucky references Hellraiser, and I believe Bride of Chucky as well. Is it Bride or is it Seed? I think Bride. When the police officer grabs the evidence of Chucky, there's also like Jason's mask and like Leatherface's chainsaw and stuff. So much horror. So much horror is like meta and referential and stuff, because that's what the fans love. The fans can't, we can't talk about Chucky without talking about other slasher icons and stuff. It all blends together.
I think that's right. And both you and I have had experience of podcasting about horror before. For my past experience was a podcast called Super Tat Film Club, where on a weekly basis we watched a terrible film and then laughed at it for an hour. And I loved doing that podcast, but that reached its natural end. And I'm hoping to actually get my former co-hosts onto an episode of ChuckyVision at some point. So maybe look out for them later on in the podcast series. I just miss talking about horror films because I love horror and I love Chucky, and this just seemed like the right opportunity at the right time for me.
It's a real fascinating period as well, because, in terms of remakes, because we've got a lot of like big films coming up. We've got new Halloweens, we've got new Candyman. It's always interesting to look at remakes and reboots and original stuff, and this is like just a weird mix of all of them. People are probably gonna tune in who haven't seen some of the sequels. They've probably seen Child's Play 1, maybe 2, back in the day when they were kids, and they were like, oh, a new Chucky TV show, and it's on, I'll watch it and give it a go. And then I'm just so fascinated as well, because it's also so canonically tied. Like, it's going to answer a lot of the questions of past films. So I wonder how that's all going to play out, because like new viewers are going to be like, who are all of these characters?
Yeah, I think that is a concern, is how they're going to get the right balance of, this is clearly continuation after the last film, after Cult of Chucky. And isn't it quite soon after Cult of Chucky it's set as well? They were straight to DVD, straight to Netflix. They weren't hugely popular like Child's Play was, like Bride of Chucky was, because I think Bride of Chucky was kind of like a resurgence in popularity after Child's Play 3 was not well received. I'll be honest, I think most people will have stopped at Bride or Seed.
Yeah, I don't think,
comparatively.
I remember there was a lot of talk online of people saying like, oh, you've got to watch Cult, it's so crazy. And for the new show, it's like, oh, you got to watch the last 2 movies. And a lot of people I stopped watching a while back. Because, they are straight to DVD. But, that's just, again, when you look at certain franchises, like the straight to DVD Hellraiser sequels, like, good lord. I'm sure the writers and directors are trying, but, there's not there is no echo of Clive Barker in some of those later sequels. Whereas here, it's the original creator. I don't care if it goes in cinemas or not. I'm going to tell more stories with Chucky.
Yeah, for me, obviously, I've seen Child's Play more times than I could count. I've seen Child's Play 2 a fair few times. Less so with Child's Play 3, but Bride I've seen 100 fucking times. And Seed I watched a few times. The 2 straight to DVDs, at the moment, obviously I'll be rewatching them, but I've seen them once.
I get that. We'll get into them with each one, but each one is kind of distinct in its own way, and I guess that appeals to some people more than it does others.
I think so. I think what's important about this teleseries, they're treating it right. They are bringing back Brad Dourif. They're bringing back Jennifer Tilly. It is what the fans would want.
Precisely, yeah. It's crazy that Seed of Chucky, I believe, was relatively low budget. I remember Don Mancini shot that really low budget. Like every film, every scene is a set. Feels weirdly like one of those Spanish telenovelas. Everything feels weird and artificial. So he shot that really low budget, and then again, he shot those later 2 direct to DVD. So it's just crazy that a TV network is giving him free reign to make a TV show, and it looks good. I don't know if you want to talk about the trailer much, but it looks really good.
Shall we get into the trailer, which was supposed to be what we were doing? 40 minutes ago.
Yeah, we can touch on it a bit.
All right. So what I liked about the trailer from the very first second is the proper horror guy voice with the start with his voiceover. I was so pleased.
That was really odd because it starts in this weird VHS thing and then it fades out. It never really goes back to it.
I was just so pleased that horror guy was there.
I feel like that was
I'm sure
in
he's
there
got a
for.
name.
I feel like that was in there for the people we just talked about who haven't seen Chucky since Child's Play. And they were like, oh yeah, the 80s, I remember that.
And it starts with a genuinely funny gag. Vintage retro. I liked that.
It's got a good streak of humour throughout. All these story threads that we're sort of alluding to, we're not really mentioning specific characters and stuff, but all these story threads that are coming into it, you really don't see any of it in this first trailer. This trailer really does sell it as, here's this new kid, Jake, and he finds a Chucky doll. The events of, effectively, Child's Play out. I think there's one shot of Jennifer Tilly and Fiona Dourif, and it's like a blink and you'll miss it shot. But other than that, it's just the new original cast.
Yeah, I mean, and I know we are going to see guest appearances from Alex Vincent, Christine Elise, and Fiona Dourif, but I also like that they're guest appearances rather than main cast.
Yeah, well, but when I looked up the actresses, Catherine Hicks and Chris Sarandon, it does say on Wikipedia that they're in the show, but I don't think they are. I think that's like archival footage. Because I really that's the weirdest thing. They barely mention Andy's mother in like the later sequels. They always just show a picture of her, and that's it. I think Catherine Hicks is done with the franchise. I don't know if Chris Sarandon's ever coming back.
No. I mean, I'd love to see it, but I don't think it'll happen. What I did love is they got it. They seem to have got it absolutely right with how they've got the doll. It feels like it's updated, like tech-wise, but still very much in the spirit of the first film. The practical effects in the first film really were, specifically for the time at least, really were very, very great. And this is clearly an update in tech, but they've managed to get the quintessential creepy, but it looks like it's accidentally creepy look. And that's so important, I think.
Definitely, yeah. He does look very good. And that was a thing they brought out, like, their sort of attention to detail and attention to the fans, that they were like, a lot of people like Child's Play 2. So this doll is very accurately based on him from Child's Play 2.
Brad Dourif's laugh, man. As soon as that happened, I'm like, yeah, I'm in.
I mean, that's an underrated thing. Like, it's really cool to get Chucky back for a TV show, but I mean, it's just great to get Brad Dourif back for the whole show, because there's going to be, with a film sequel, you get 90 minutes of him, but like, we're going to get a lot more of him, which is really good, and especially good because, he has a good history on TV and stuff. Some people might only know him for Chucky, but good lord, like, I think maybe one of his best roles is on Deadwood.
Oh, he was great in Deadwood.
Brad Dourif on TV can be amazing, so exploring Chucky in more detail will definitely give Brad an opportunity to get some, like, range and variety with the character.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that they've got Brad Dourif, they've got a physical puppet rather than making it CGI-tastic. That's absolutely the right decision.
Yeah, that again, like, the TV network just giving them free reign to do all that, because Curse of Chucky was very low budget, and they used, for some shots, like a CGI Chucky, like walking down the stairs and stuff. It looked ropey. It looked very ropey.
It's not what we want. It is not what we want. I've always been a fan of practical effects. I do feel to some extent that if you can't do it with a practical effect, maybe don't do it, because it's just fucking lazy. I hate CG.
Yeah, I mean, it has its place.
Says the guy who loves the fucking MCU franchise. I'm just full of shit. But you know what I mean? For something like this,
it definitely has its place. Yeah, for the conceit of a killer doll, it needs to feel real. It absolutely needs to feel real.
And it was right when they did it with Grogu in The Mandalorian. So it's been proved that a modern show can work well with a proper puppet.
Precisely, yeah.
They've got the spirit of Child's Play in this, with some one-liners from Chucky or Brad Dourif. You snooze, you lose. I'm going to kill your sister. Want to come? It's just, they've got it. Watching this trailer felt right. It felt like Child's Play. It felt like the Chucky franchise. It felt like it was done by people who love these films. And I'm really, really looking forward to it. And I'm really, really optimistic about it as well after seeing this trailer.
I am definitely. And especially, like, I would recommend fans to follow the Instagrams of some of the stars. Like, Fiona's only been in it for a couple films, but she already feels like part of the whole family of child play. And Jennifer Tilly in particular, like, if you want to know more, there could be an investigative podcast just on Jennifer Tilly's Instagram, because she puts out so many behind the scenes pictures that, like, aren't in the trailers. You could maybe put together some of the plot just from how much she's putting out.
Brilliant. She's just so cool, isn't she?
She is wonderful. I mean, like, some of the highlights, I should have got his name. I'll mention it in another episode, but I believe they have a dwarf again playing Chucky for, like, the body doubles, but he's like a kid. He's only like 12 or 13.
Right.
And Jennifer's Twitter is lovely because there's so many pictures of just him, like, behind the scenes just hanging out with her. She's very bubbly with him. It's really nice and positive to see.
Do you know, I don't think I actually follow. I don't like Instagram. It's like Twitter on hard mode. So I might actually be arsed with that, though, because that does sound worth having a look at.
I don't even know if it's going to be a scene in the movie, but there's a very weird picture of her and Don Mancini in a bathtub together. I mean,
good for Don Mancini if that floats your boat. But it doesn't, because it's Don Mancini.
Exactly, yeah.
Other than that, again, the music was really appropriate, thematic, and I enjoyed it. I just came out of this trailer going, can't wait.
Precisely. It's going to feel, you mentioned it before, but it's going to feel like Ash vs. the Evil Dead, where it's like, oh my God, they're coming back, and they're coming back for TV. There's going to be, like, so much more of this world and so much more of this character. And then, it's like 6 episodes or so, and it passes by so fast, and it's like, oh my God, I hope they get season 2. I hope this comes back again, because, like, I was in this world, and then I'm suddenly out of this world again.
Yeah. Was there anything else you wanted to mention from the trailer?
I don't think we were going to break it down scene by scene because, as I say, it all feels very new and original. So we'd only be guessing at where the story could go. Yeah, it feels like a fun, not retread, but like re-exploration of the plot of Child's Play and stuff. So yeah.
So Dev, it's been a pleasure, and having this chat has made me want it even more, and I wanted it a lot.
Exactly. Yeah, I can't wait to talk about it. How long have we been going now, just in this primer?
50 minutes.
Okay. I think our actual film talk is going to have to be very concise.
I think it says a lot about you, a lot about me, and a lot about the Chucky franchise that we've managed that. So let's wrap it up. Dave, where can people find you on the internet?
Me? I'm at a few different places. I think if you follow me on Twitter, which is at @AbsoluteTravisT, then I think in my bio, I've just got links to elsewhere and stuff. There's an umbrella branch. Keep an eye on me there. I do have a Twitch that I'm going to be doing soon-ish. I don't want to go into that too much, but I sometimes do a Twitch where I talk about, like, writing movie sequels and stuff. I was in the process of writing Scary Movie 6, which is a whole other conversation.
Oh dear.
I like that franchise.
You can't do any worse than the fucking all of them other than the first one. They're bloody awful.
Yeah, how are you on social media?
I'm all over it. I do more podcasts than any human
Good point.
should.
Yeah, you
and
do.
I'll try and be concise. I do a podcast about kids TV. That's called Right in the Childhood at RATC Pod on Twitter. I do a podcast based around my job as a humanist celebrant. That's called Life's Milestones at Life's Milestones on Twitter. I do a podcast about Red Dwarf. That is at Red Dwarf Pod on Twitter. I do a podcast about tattoos. That's called Ink Stories at Ink Stories Pod on Twitter and Instagram. And if you want to find me, at Mark Adams HC on Twitter and Instagram. I really shouldn't have started another podcast, but I'm so fucking excited, mate.
Like I said at the start, I could talk about Chucky on air, off air. You don't even need to be talking. I could probably fill this 50 minutes with just me rattling on about Chucky.
So thank you for joining us on the first episode of ChuckyVision. And until next time, wanna play? ChuckyVision is a podcast brought to you by the We Made This Network. Follow us on Twitter at ChuckyVision. Follow the network on Twitter at WMT_network. Our website is WeMadeThisNetwork.com. The logo was designed by Dev, and the theme tune composed by Dark Fantasy Studios. Wanna play?
Hello everyone, this is Tony, Network Chief of We Made This. As you know, our podcast network brings together a brilliant assortment of talent who talk about all kinds of pop culture content, such as the episode you just listened to. We're not going anywhere, but we'd love to keep the lights on for even longer if you're able to support our network on Patreon. For just £2 a month, you get your name in lights and the satisfaction of knowing you're helping us produce more great audio. And for £3 a month, you'll get your name in lights, but you'll also get access to an exclusive bi-monthly podcast from the We Made This talent pool on podcasting, pop culture, and, well, you tell us. We'll take your suggestions. For less than the price of a coffee per month, you can help keep We Made This going. Just head to patreon.com/We Made This. That's patreon.com/We Made This. And get the ball rolling. Elsewhere on We Made This. The Movie Palace podcast.
So I normally just ask people, Robert, their general thoughts on Alfred Hitchcock. Yeah, what are your thoughts and feelings about Hitchcock?
Well, it's funny because we had discussed, how this talk was going to go today, and I kept thinking, why have I been so interested in Hitchcock? Generally speaking, I'm more interested in the less technical filmmakers, and Hitchcock is such a technical filmmaker.
We dig music.
How come you always refer to Jonathan Donahue as Donahue and you always refer to PJ Harvey as Polly?
Because she's overly familiar with Polly. Right.
Yeah, that could do it.
It freaks me out as well. Like I don't call any of the singers in bands by their first name because I don't know them. I'm not like, oh, there's my mate Johannes from Cult of Luna. No. It's Johannes from Cult of Luna or Johannes Person or, oh my God, it's Johannes Person from Cult of Luna sometimes. Like, that's how I refer to him.
So you're saying that it's sit down Mr. Ulrich instead of sit down Lars?
I think it depends how much I take an artist to heart, and Polly is very, very dear to me. So.
Well, she thinks you're a prick because you don't like Ministry.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast.
But you're not really quite sure what's happened there. It might put you off seeing the next one.
That does make a lot of sense, actually. Good point. All right.
Carl can always give us the information in a way we can make it understand. Me and Mark just go blah 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 blah.
I occasionally sound vaguely intelligent when I try very hard. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I occasionally
whine about gay shit. I'm multifaceted.
Okay. Anyway, moving on.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.